The sky over the North Sea is a bruised purple, heavy with storm clouds that look as worn and tired as the warriors below them. A lone Viking longship cuts across the restless water, its dragon-head prow still fierce but scarred from decades of battle. The oars move in slow, uneven rhythm, no longer the powerful strokes of young raiders hungry for glory, but the labored effort of men who have grown old in the shadow of war. Their beards are streaked with gray, their hands calloused and cracked, their eyes reflecting memories of victories that feel distant now. There Jarl stands at the front of the ship, cloak snapping in the cold wind. He once led fleets of 50 longships, sailing without fear into foreign kingdoms. Now he commands only one. As he scans the horizon, he does not see undefended monasteries or unprepared villages. Instead, he sees stone fortifications rising where wooden fences once stood. He sees banners of Christian kings fluttering above towers, troops patrolling the shores, witchfires burning day and night. The world has changed. When the longship approaches land, church bells begin to ring, far before the Vikings even touch the shore. Armored soldiers march into formation, shields locked, spears pointed outward. Horses snort and stomp the earth, ready for counterattack. The raiders exchange weary glances. This is no longer the age where a single Viking crew could terrorize an entire kingdom. The Jarl grips his sword but hesitates. He knows this might be their last raid, not because they lack courage, but because the era that once allowed them to dominate has passed. The sea remains wild, but the world has grown stronger. And for the first time, the Vikings feel the weight of history turning against them. In the heart of England, inside a great wooden hall lit by torches and firelight, a new kind of war council unfolds, one the Vikings had never expected to face. Once, these lands trembled at the sound of longships. Kings paid the Danegeld to buy peace, and villages hid in fear when dragon-proud ships touched the shore. But now, the hall is filled with armored commanders, scribes, monks, and seasoned warriors who have studied the Viking threat for generations. Maps stretch across a heavy oak table, pinned down by daggers. The lines drawn on them show a New England, one fortified, united, and prepared. A king stands at the head of the room, not a frightened ruler begging for mercy, but a monarch empowered by alliances and a trained, disciplined army. His voice is steady as he explains their strategy: fortified burhs along the coast, cavalry trained to counter quick raids, messenger networks ready to warn towns long before the Vikings arrive. On the walls hang swords, standards, and shields, symbols of the new power rising in Europe. The commanders discuss patrol routes, logistics, and intelligence gathered from spies who monitor Viking movements. Unlike earlier centuries, the Viking threat is no longer unpredictable. Armies are ready at all times, trained not just to defend but to hunt down raiding bands. Outside the hall, knights train in muddy courtyards, their horses armored and swift, something the Vikings were never able to match. Archers practice rapid volleys, and smiths forge iron weapons in massive quantities. A quiet truth settles over the council: the balance of power has shifted. The Vikings are still fierce, but Europe has learned their tactics, adapted, and surpassed them. What once made the Vikings unstoppable now makes them predictable. And a predictable enemy is a doomed one. Winter hangs heavily over the Scandinavian forest, its silence broken only by the distant caw of ravens and the crunch of snow under leather boots. A procession moves slowly between the towering pines, warriors, farmers, families, all following their chieftain to a clearing where a simple stone cross stands. Frost clings to its surface, but it rises firmly, a symbol of a new age pushing its way into the old world. The chieftain is a man who once carried Thor's hammer into battle, who offered sacrifices to Odin before every raid. His victories, his wealth, even his identity were shaped by the old gods. Yet now, as he drops to one knee before the cross, there is no thunder in the sky, no whispering from the ancient spirits. Only the gentle voice of a traveling monk reciting prayers in a language few understand but many are beginning to accept. Around him stand his sons, young men raised on sagas of Asgard and Valhalla. But their hands no longer grip axes during ceremonies, instead, small wooden crucifixes hang around their necks. They watch their father kneel, knowing that this moment marks the end of an era that defined their ancestors for centuries. The monk places a hand on the chieftain's head and speaks softly. The warriors behind him exchange uncertain glances. Some fear the wrath of the old gods. Others feel relief. No more endless raiding, no more blood feuds, no more sacrifices. Slowly, the chieftain rises, his breath visible in the icy air. He does not feel weaker. He feels lighter. This new faith promises peace, unity, and order, things the fractured clans of the North desperately need. The sagas will not end, but the way of life behind them is shifting. Pagan fires dim, wooden crosses multiply. The Viking Age is not dying. It is transforming from within. The wind over Greenland cuts like a blade, sharp, cold, and relentless. Once, this land was a beacon of hope for the Norse settlers, a bold frontier where they built farms, churches, and halls that echoed with laughter and ambition. But now the air feels haunted. Snow drifts over abandoned fields, and the wooden beams of longhouses creak like old bones under the weight of an unforgiving climate. Winter has grown longer, the summers shorter, sea ice thickens earlier each year, choking the routes that once carried trade ships from Iceland and Norway. Without these lifelines, the colony slowly starves, not from war, but from isolation. Sheep perish in frozen pastures, and the once strong cattle grow thin and sickly. Even the proud hunters struggle. The walrus herds have moved north, following waters the settlers can no longer reach. Inside a small church, the heart of the community, a bishop conducts one final service. Only a handful of families remain, their faces pale from hunger and fear. Candle flames flicker weakly as the bishop's voice trembles through a sermon of farewell. He knows, as they all do, that staying means death. Outside, a ship waits at the frozen shore. Not a fleet, not a proud longship, just a single vessel, battered by storms and time. The last families walk toward it slowly, leaving behind homes their ancestors built with hope carved into every beam. Children cling to carved wooden animals, the last reminders of a land they may never see again. As they board, the wind howls through the empty settlement, rattling the doors of deserted houses. A final glance reveals fields once green now covered in a silent white shroud. When the ship pushes off, the settlement disappears behind a curtain of snow. Greenland, once the western edge of the Viking world, slips quietly into history, swallowed by the cold. Along a quiet Scandinavian shoreline, dawn spills across the sky in hues of soft gold and pale blue. The sea is calm, too calm for an age once defined by roaring waves and the thunder of longships rushing into battle. Half buried in the sand lies the skeleton of such a vessel, its once proud dragon prow now worn smooth by centuries of wind and tide. Grass grows through the cracks in its hull, birds nest in its ribs. It stands not as a weapon of war, but as a monument to a world that has faded. Nearby, a young boy walks along the shore, his wool cloak fluttering in the breeze. He pauses in front of the abandoned longship, tracing its weathered wood with curious fingers. To him, this relic is not a symbol of fear or conquest, it is a story. A legend, something told to him by his grandfather beside the hearth. In the distance, smaller ships glide across the water, not warships, but merchant vessels carrying wool, furs, iron, and grain. Their sails are bright and clean, marked not with snarling beasts but with the banners of kingdoms. The boy watches them, hearing not the war cries of raiders, but the lively calls of traders and sailors. Beyond the coast, towns have risen, organized, fortified, and peaceful. Markets bustle with goods from across Europe. Blacksmiths craft plows instead of swords. Kings rule with councils, laws, and diplomacy rather than raids and blood feuds. The old warrior culture still exists, but it has softened, reshaped by the needs of a new era. The boy looks back at the longship one last time before turning toward the village. The future he steps into is different, more stable, more connected, more civilized. The Viking spirit has not vanished. It has evolved, becoming part of the growing tapestry of medieval Europe.